So John Higgins, press coordinator at Paris International Film Festival, and another and writer, reporter, film journalist, all sorts of. Correct me if I'm wrong, but all sorts of titles and things going on.
Yeah, it's thank you. First of all, thank you very much, Glenn, for inviting me on here. Yeah, it's quite interesting because in this uncertain time, a lot of what you're talking about is actually what's come out of. I mean, it came out of redundancy because about 7 years ago, from 1996 to 2013, I was a film projectionist for the British Board of Film Classification, which is the British version of the MPAA. So I was very lucky, and I ran films, but then digital and kind of kicked in, and basically digital's kind of made projection a bit of a it's a more simple thing. So I'm sure with the multiplexes in the States, you might have 17 or 18 screens and maybe one stuff. So I was about 7 years ago, I was having to rethink what my career priorities were going to be. So I kind of needed a break. I suffered burnouts. Now, in the context of what's happening at the moment, I think a lot of people, because COVID has been a really interesting leveler. A lot of people are, there's been jobs that have been lost. If you look at the airline industry, people can't travel from the States, for example. There's a lot of uncertainty. I mean, from the very beginning of the year when this thing happened, I mean, the weird thing is, we didn't really think it was going to hit this side of the world. We kind of watched it on China and we thought, oh, this is going to be like the SARS virus and it's kind of be contained and stuff. And, the only time we ever thought about pandemics or things was in 28 weeks later, or even, the funny thing is when you watch Wolfgang Petersen's Outbreak, the 1994 film with Dustin Hoffman, I mean, the weird thing is we kind of saw that as a mass entertainment. It was kind of a complex thing, but then all of a sudden, you watch it and you're actually seeing, it's an even more frightening idea. But we shouldn't really be talking about that. I think what we need to talk about is actually the positives of what happens when in this thing called the new normal. So I'm going to go back to after redundancy. I kind of decided I wanted to sort of take a break, and I went on a semi-sabbatical. And then in 2015, I started writing for Film and TV Now, which is a website. I started in a voluntary capacity, but I started writing reviews for films called Friday the 13th. My very first review for the website was a Halloween review of Friday the 13th. And it was interesting. And then as time's gone on, I've become a kind of a really nice source of point of contact for journalists and filmmakers and stuff like that. So as you mentioned in the introduction, I've just started doing press coordination for the Paris International Film Festival with a lady called Jenna Sura, who I actually did a review for her film The Golden Age, which is on the website. It premiered in London at the London Independent Film Festival, and that was one of the last festivals to be live before the lockdown. I mean, the lockdown happened when the festival occurred. So, but we've stayed in touch, and we've been sort of networking per se. So I'm now sort of helping her do promotion for the web festival and promotion for the film, for example. So there's a whole load of stuff on filmandtvnow.com you can read, a whole load of reviews. I've done about 10 in the last week or so for a number of movies. I was actually finishing off one just now. And so that was the first part of it. Then the second part of it, I mean, I've been using LinkedIn a lot, so I'm very connected on LinkedIn. Yep. So I think the important thing to remember about what you do here is the important thing to remember is to be proactive and procreative with whatever it is you do. I think there's a lot of people out there who will probably be listening to this podcast or watching this podcast who will think, well, what am I going to do now? I had this great, I was very comfortable. Yeah. But what you can do is you can say, well, look on it as an opportunity. I found that most of the stuff that people are going through at the moment, the uncertainty and the what's going to happen and what's going to do it, is pretty much stuff that I'd done, I went through with redundancy, so you kind of are detached from it, and you're not sure which way to go or what you're doing. So what's happened is I've now found that you've created your own new normal.
Yeah.
So
absolutely,
the idea is you because the thing is with technology, the great thing is with Zoom, for example, and this is now become like probably the next best thing to one-to-one or meeting people. The great thing is technology across the world does this. And, I found it with things like the London Screenwriters Festival. They started using the technology for their virtual events in March of this year.
Yep.
And it was great because they have breakout rooms. So it was kind of like being in the room with it. And of course, you didn't have to worry about being in the room with these people. Although that said, talking to people in my network, it's like we're more eager to get back to the normal of just going out and, because I feel this is what's going to happen. I think maybe next year when things are a bit more clearer, but we don't know at the moment, it will be a really interesting thing to see. People will want to get back to a more communal feeling, even if it's only with maybe 10 or 11 people. I think for people who want to get married, for example,
Yeah.
people want okay, so you can have like a wedding with like 6 or 7 people, but it's not the same as a grand wedding where you have a tent or a reception and you have a party at the night and you want to get drunk or celebrate your thing. So it's stuff like that I feel is really good anyway. So yeah, I mean, it's I think what you find is, what I would advise people is to find something closer to your heart, because rather than just sit down and feel sorry for yourself. And with respect to people who've been through all this, it's difficult times, but I feel that we will get through it. We will, it's a lot of people say that this is not unlike, in World War II, for example, when in the UK, for example, it was like, people had to live underground and stuff. And it's kind of a similar thing, but the difference is as people have commented here, people aren't going out. It's not D-Day or Dunkirk or, people going away to fight for freedom or whatever it is in Europe. All people are being asked to do is stay at home and shelter and self-isolate and keep the distance by 2 meters, which is a very small price to pay, just to help preserve the actual thing. But the Zoom revolution, I think, is what people are doing. I think it's about finding that balance of interpersonal relationships and technology, to use technology in a positive way, because this is, it's a great opportunity. And what I have noticed with what I've been doing over the last 2 or 3 years particularly is that it's creating a much more positive reaction, and people are now tapping into my vision per se. And yeah.
I mean, and you're absolutely right. I think, we're kind of lucky, it really is an unfortunate, circumstances that we've been in for the last 6 months. We probably will be in for the next year, I think. I'm kind of like, I'm the guy that multiplies everything by 1.5, almost multiplies it by 2, so if they're saying a vaccine by next summer maybe, then I'm probably going to still self-quarantine, or at least be still very cautious. 6 months past that, wait to hear about the vaccines and but focusing on what we do as far as film and reviewing film or making film, ever since films have been televised, and then and then digital medium, it's still a film. It's still, from beginning to middle to end, it's still a film. It's or a TV episode, or a short film, or an entire series. And so, ever since televised TV serials and films, ever since digitized, we're able to work around that, and we're able to have virtual film festivals and virtual film screenings, watch parties. I mean, way before the quarantine, Facebook started doing watch parties. And so that's essentially, a microfilm festival or a microfilm screening. And we're able to, especially with filmmaking and video gaming, film and TV, audio, video, music, things of this nature, that's ever since it's been digitized, 20 years ago, the possibilities are endless as far as a virtual digital platform to be able to continue what we do. It's going to be it's going to be much different, but essentially, the core elements are still there. It's the same core elements.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've got a plan to do is because I've got a company on my LinkedIn profile called Nightway Theatre Company. I'm sort of looking at the idea of a different model for theatre production, live production, because I feel one of the things I did notice in America is that the drive-in has come back into fashion because people,
big time,
and the great thing is it's not something it's probably not something that's very British, although we'll see it in films, and we do see it in, I know, for example, when Psycho was first released in 1960, it was a very big hit on the drive-in circuits. And then, of course, and in the UK, for example, we've got things like in London, for example, the closest thing I think we have to it is a thing called British Summertime, which is they do a series of concerts over about the first or second week in July. Well, what they do is they open up the enclosure for free screening. So 1 year, for example, and they give you headphones. And 1 year I did Ghostbusters and Top Gun in the evening. So from about 6:30 in the evening, we all sat down on the, so we all had to go down and stuff. And I think with the possibilities, because with digital technology, I believe that there will come a time where the actual theatre experience is going to be, for the sake of live performance, because I think you've got, I think there'll be a catapult effect because actors, for example, and technicians and theatre people will want to work again. I think there's kind of people chomping at the bit. I mean, I actually did a cameo as an actor about 2 weeks ago for a new British horror film called Frostbite with a friend of mine called Anthony Hales. I went down for one night, shut over one night, but people are finding their ways to produce stuff. I think people are going to find alternatives. And, I did my COVID test and my temperature test, and I didn't have any problems whatsoever. I mean, that's the other thing about the virus. It's like, if this was that deadly, I think we'd all be suffering. I mean, it's a crazy situation. So I'm blessed that it's not happened. I mean, that's not to say I'm not taking anything for granted. I have to wear a mask on the tube, the subway here in London. But I feel that this is another opportunity for theatre producers and film producers to examine the whole presentation aspect of what it is. So I think it's a really good way with the driving situation. People are going to, because I think mass entertainment is going to return in a big way. I think live concerts are going to be in a big way because, I think that there will be a kind of a response to that.
There's going to be a huge rush back to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think this is the thing is, with the delay of films like I mean, I went to see Tenet in 70mm in London at the Odeon Leicester Square, which is one of the last places to show 70mm. But it was what was great was, although I had to wear the mask and I had to wear that in the cinema, it was just so nice to sit in a theatre. And I got such a real buzz from watching the trailers beforehand. So they showed, for example, they showed the trailers for Black Widow and Bill and Ted Face the Music and Wonder Woman 1984 now, and No Time to Die, the James Bond film, which, for me, it just would not be right for me to see those films, given that, when you look at the Marvel films, for example, which, that's Avengers Endgame, and that, the real spirit of watching these movies in the cinema with a communal atmosphere, because I think the Marvel fans do want to see them in a proper theater. And, that's what I love about it. I'm not somebody who, although my friends have Netflix and stuff like that, and it's nice to do stuff like that, and streaming's good, there's just something that the communal experience of watching a movie in its proper environment that's what's appealing to me.
Right.
So I think, I'm hoping that there will be a situation where, there's a bit of innovation and improvisation in terms of creating. That's not to say that we shouldn't be we don't want the proper theatre experience in the buildings or the Lincoln Centre or whatever your local movie theatres or stage theatres are in Cleveland, for example, because those are just as important. I mean, I think, Cameron McIntosh, for example, recently announced that he's actually invested a lot of his own fortune to put people back into, to help people who are in need in the theatre district here. I mean, Andrew Lloyd Webber was trying stuff as well. And he's actually sort of made himself a guinea pig for tests in Oxford. So I hope that, that we will, that this time next year we'll be sort of back in, hopefully, a situation where we are in, like, there's a balance again. We're not just sitting at home watching our favorite films in there. And I think that, I hope that we can, I'm eager to do more of that. I want to see Wonder Woman on the big screen. I want to see Bond on the big screen and Black Widow, because these are event movies. I want to see a Tom Cruise battling it out in the latest Mission Impossible. And,
Mission Impossible 7 and 8 and 9. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And I mean, if you look at Denis Villeneuve's upcoming remake of version of Dune, I mean, that he's a big screen filmmaker,
and just Dune itself is this epic, big screen thing. And there's a lot of properties that really aren't given justice unless they're on a huge screen with, what is it, 10.2 surround sound, multi-bass, sort of, magnificent sound and magnificent picture type of presentation.
And also as well, I've just done a review for the new Woody Allen film, Rainy Day in New York, which is Timothée Chalamet and Elle Fanning and Liev Schreiber. It's out for release in October. And the review's available then. I mean, again, Woody Allen film, for example, that's a real brand. That's a movie that can, it's designed to be a specific audience,
right.
But I like the idea that, the weird thing about Woody Allen films is they haven't really changed. They're the same. You could watch any number of Woody Allen films, like Annie Hall, for example, like the same font of typeface in the credits. It's the same kind of ensemble pieces. It's a group of actors, who are reflecting their own things. And but it's equally something that does belong to be seen with an audience on a big screen. Sofia Coppola, I think, has got a brand new movie coming out shortly as well, which is screening, I think, around the time of London Film Festival. There are, like, the Prince Charles Cinema in London, for example, is resuming live screenings on the 1st of October, and people are gradually making their way back. So, but yeah, so I think hopefully this will be a very gradual rollout, and I think people will just have to, I think once people are a bit more confident, they will return to what they truly love, and we've had it in the past where, there are some films, for example, people saw at home. I mean, one example was Lethal Weapon 2, which was bigger than the first film, simply because, from what I understand it, people saw the film on home video and then realized that why didn't I see this film in the cinema? And then, of course, they went to see it, and then the sequels happened. And I think it would be good for business. People will want to see, people do want to go back to that situation, and they want to go back to the joys of going to a multiplex and having a proper day out, and that's what I think is going to happen. I don't believe for a minute it's probably done everybody the world of good to kind of have a break from it all. I think that will be the other thing. I think the creativity behind the movies will be very good as well. People will have worked a bit more on their ideas and stuff, and we'll have interesting variations. I mean, certainly from the films that I've seen from the short filmmakers that I do often get a chance to watch because I do articles with them on the website. There's a lot of interesting films out there. A guy called Andrew McArdle's done a really interesting radical film called It's Always Been You, which is set in Brooklyn, but it's a bit like a Robert Altman version. You know, you're never quite sure. It's like there's all manner of characters, and it's such a left field experience. You know, you have to kind of watch 2 or 3 times to realize what it's all about, but then you realize that's the intention of the director.
Sure. Yeah. And you know, you've raised a good point about, you know, different directors and how Woody Allen, you know, the same typeface, the same font with all his films, and it almost, you know, there's only a few Woody Allen movies I've seen, and I guess my critique of Woody Allen films is they're almost all the same, except for I had to watch the one that Larry David starred in because I'm a huge Larry David fan. But you're right, because his style, it's almost like every single one of his movies is a chapter in Woody Allen's life. Yeah. That's why it's the same typeface. It just takes place in his world in every movie. As what's the one with Penelope Cruz? She was kind of like demented a little bit, and
yeah,
I think it was Scarlett Johansson and Penelope Cruz.
I remember that one. I'm trying to remember what the title was, but
you know, but some of these titles, they escape us. But still, you know, Radio Days was like a flashback to maybe his, you know, childhood. But Annie Hall was like present day. In that year, Annie Hall was present day chapter of his life. And then the next movie, and he might not be acting in these movies, but you know, Owen Wilson, Larry David. I forget some of the actors that have been in some of his movies, but they're essentially all playing Woody Allen.
Yeah,
you know, and
they are kind of, you find that they are nuances, because, and also when you watch Timothy Chalamet in this new film, the weird thing is you kind of see like Woody Allen at the time of Love and Death and Bananas, and that's early kind of 70s stuff. I think the one thing I do miss about Allen is that some of his earlier stuff like Bananas and Love and Death, the craziness that he's done, and like Sleeper, for example.
Sleeper is, and that's another one. Sleeper is by far, this is a chapter in his life. What if, you know, he was frozen and he woke up, you know, 200 years in the future? You know, Sleeper is by far one of my favorites of his. It's just so, but it's probably because it's so different, because I like to see different things from filmmakers for the most part, but not to interrupt, but.
Yeah, no, it's all right. I mean, I find that, you know, very few filmmakers, I think a lot of people, they find a style, but sometimes you'll get somebody who will surprise people. I mean, like the late Joel Schumacher, for example. I mean, he did films like St. Elmo's Fire and The Lost Boys, and then all of a sudden in 1993, he did this absolute belter of a film called Falling Down with Michael Douglas, which took place around the time of the Rodney King riots. But the great thing is it was such a subversive film, and for the fact that it was Michael Douglas playing against type, and you had a really sympathy, you know, and I like the dynamic of the Robert Duvall character and the Michael Douglas character, and how the fact that the two of them were going through an interesting arc in their thing, and their actual actions of one were affecting the other.
Yeah.
And the fact that there was a misunderstanding of what Michael Douglas was doing. So every single character he bumps into, from the Latinos to the Whammy Burger to the Frederick Forrest neo-Nazi character who misunderstands what he's doing. But that's what I love. I think I love it when a filmmaker surprises people. You know, when they do something which is, you just think, did he really do that? Is that, wow, I'm so surprised. But I think that's the talent of a filmmaker. I think when they do decide that they're going to go outside their comfort zone and direct something that's going to challenge it, like Ridley Scott, for example. I mean, he went through the same thing with Thelma and Louise. You know, where, you know, he was more regarded as a stylist before Thelma and Louise. Then all of a sudden he did this movie that polarized opinion, You know, I mean, the same kind of polarizing reactions that they had in 1991. They did a screening recently in London, the sellout screening, and the same kind of polarizing reactions occurred. You know, people reacted it in different ways, but it still makes it a really brilliant, it's a real great classic. I mean, Calais Curry's scripts is superb, and some great performances from all people all around.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin Smith with Red State and Tusk. I mean, Kevin Smith is known for Clerks and Mallrats and Chasing Amy, all the Jay and Silent Bob movies.
Yeah.
And then he shoots one, you know, way out of, you know, right field with Red State, which is a complete horror about a religious cult. And then Tusk, you know, a very dark kind of horror comedy, you know, dark comedy horror about some guy obsessed with turning a human into a walrus. You know, it's just like these bizarre stories. And then his next movie, I think, was Jay and Silent Bob reboot. You know, like he gets an odd idea and he runs with it, but he makes that idea fit within. He makes he makes the film fit within the idea. He doesn't make a horror movie like Jay and Silent Bob. He steps, like you said, good directors, good filmmakers will step outside their comfort zone, and you know, if they have a crazy idea, they make the idea the thing. They don't make it a, you know, they don't necessarily make it a Kevin Smith idea. They make that idea the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Two recommendations. One of them is, if anybody out there is interested in learning some really more intense stuff, if you go onto the Masterclass website, which is masterclass.com, for about $169 or something, you can learn about these really great masterclasses from the likes of Ron Howard, Martin Scorsese, Jodie Foster. I've watched a few of them. They're absolutely brilliant. The Steve Martin comedy workshop is brilliant if you get a chance, because he's also serious in it, but he really does, you know, because it's against, again, we were talking about against the grain. I thought it was fantastic, and he has a few like students in there talking about their writing and stuff, and he talks about how he got there with little or no talent, but he discovered that he had a process. And the common thing that people say in these masterclasses is to find your own process. So that's the first thing I recommend. The second thing is actually a streaming thing. If horror fans should check out Shudder's In Search of Darkness epic documentary, which is 4.5 hours, but it chronicles 10 years of horror in 1980. I love this. It's like every single horror title you could dream of. It kicks off with John Carpenter talking about Fog, and then goes through to, you know, 1989, and it's something that that's the one thing I'd recommend it. I mean, I'm hoping to see some of the Creep Show reboots as well. So
yeah, well, I like that you mentioned In the Search of Darkness, because I think that was produced and edited by the guy who does Good Bad Flicks on YouTube. So he's got a YouTube channel where he reviews good bad flicks. So, you know, like these bad, you know, what most people might consider bad B movies, even C movies, but these are movies that he loves because, and then somehow he comes to discover the backstory about how all they had was, you know, a couple $1,000. So they made this crazy movie, or, you know, whatever the case may be, you know, like these B movies, these internationally produced, you know, all those 80s movies that were produced in the Philippines for nickels on it, you know, pennies on the dime, you know, low budget 80s movies. But I think In the Search of Darkness was produced by this guy, produced and directed. This was like his double feature or something. You said it was a 4-hour, is it a series or a 4-hour documentary?
It's a well, I don't know how it should have done it. I mean, it'd be interesting to see whether or not they've done it as 4 1-hour. I actually watched it in I didn't watch it in one block, but I had it as a review link for like 4.5 hours. So it was like, you know, when I opened it up, I think, blimey. But the truth of the matter is it's hugely enjoyable, because you can, if like me, you know, you've been a horror fan for over 3 decades, and you've, you know, because I'm part of the VHS generation when, certainly in the UK, when before regulation around 1982, you know, we had access to a lot of interesting titles, which, you know, which weren't released in the cinemas, but there was a lot of people buying up like a lot of people were buying up the rights to these titles and then distributed them. And then, you know, I mean, Arrow Film Distribution, Arrow Video have just launched, they're about to launch a US arm as well, which they're launching a streaming service in the US and Canada, which is an extension of their label in the UK, because they do a lot of really great special editions. So if you're talking about the cult stuff, the team do some, you know, I've got updates. They've got a 4K version of the thing. They've just released things like Carrie and the Thing, and Carrie and the Fury. They did a really great, well, they've actually done 2 really excellent special editions of Last House on the Left and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. In the case of the latter, they actually included on one of the discs, they included Tobe Hooper's debut film, Eggshells, which is this weird, which all I will say is it's a crazy, it's like a hippie commune, and there's like a weird egg thing in the basement. I mean, they did Tobe Hooper was over in the UK for the Fright Fest in 2010, and they did a screening of it, and we all came out of it wondering, well, that's weird. And I think things like Cronenberg's early work, Stereo and Crime of the Future, which I did see at one screen, which were unfinished. I mean, they were missing sound, but again, they were weird things. But it was the only virtue of them was you wanted to see, you'd heard about them and you wanted to see them.
Yeah.
But they've done a really excellent one for Last House on the Left, which, and I actually had the pleasure of meeting David Hess when he came over. He was over in London for Smash Cut, which was a film he did with Michael Berryman from Hills of Ice in 2010. And he was the most likable guy in the world. I mean, he was totally unlike the characters he played in Last House and also House on the Edge of the Park, which, and I've got a picture of him somewhere. And like Kane Hodder, who's the guy who played Jason, he's one of the most likable guys in the world. He's this gentle giant of a man who really understands it, and he appreciates his place in the realm. So yeah, so people can check that out. I think it's just check out our streaming service in the States. That's another of the recommendations, and they're showing like a lot of the stuff that's on there. I think Herschel Gordon Lewis's cult films from the 60s are up there as well. Blood Feast, 2000 Maniacs, and that group of films as well, which will be interesting for people to see. And those have been lovingly restored for modern audiences, because in John McCarthy's Splatter Movies was one of the first books I read, and that was when I first read about Herschel Gordon Lewis.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, when I watch filmmakers like Eli Roth and Rob Zombie, you know, like clearly these guys are fans of those 70s and 80s, you know, schlock horror, you know, grindhouse type of movie nights, and they're very open about it. I mean, Rob Zombie's stuff is very over the top, very, you know, sometimes borderline hard to watch, but it's, you know, it's almost like wrong to be entertained by it, but yet it's still, you know, entertaining and engaging. But yeah, is there anything you've been watching that wasn't for work? You know, just for enjoyment
well, the funny thing is I've just tomorrow they're releasing tickets for the virtual Fright Fest. So I like, as I say, I was talking to my friend Ben Slive, who we're both veterans. We were talking about, I'll get onto the whole festival in a minute anyway, but we're going to be doing something for newbies. You know, we're going to hopefully sort of get people to embrace the festival, you know, if they're not sure about it, just to give them a chance to, you know, to become part of the community and stuff. But no, I mean, first and foremost, you know, we'll be talking a bit more about one of the other things I want to talk about is a point of passion. And I've been a movie obsessive since I was 9. But I feel very lucky now, because I'm now sort of in a zone where, having worked in the industry as a projectionist and now being a writer and as a screenwriter, I mean, I'm going to tell you a couple of about a couple of the projects that I'm working on at the moment. But I've seen, you know, like I see a lot of stuff. The funny thing is the line is blurred now. because I find that I'm enjoying them. But the bonuses is that I review them and I watch them and then I post a review. So I get I find that I'm more in keep. It's kind of like when I was 17 or 16 or 17 and sitting at home watching films on VHS, going to the local VHS library. So I don't worry about it. I think the great thing is it's a pleasure. Yeah. Everything I watch is a pleasure. It's not about, you know, and the fact that I shot a cameo in a horror film the other week, you know, was great. And and as I say, I've one of the other projects that I'm working on at the moment is a thing called Torchhead, which is a short film which I'm doing with a guy called David Fussell. Now, what's special about David Fussell? He's known as the homeless film director. And there's a documentary online. If you Google the homeless film director Vice, you can watch his half-hour documentary. And if you want to talk about things that I've really loved, this documentary is really fantastic. It shows this guy who he moved to London from Wales, and he did a film called Mystic Demon Killer. And he's now you know, he's been selling copies on there, and I'm sort of doing a bit of work with him. So we've got this script and we're looking to raise finance for it. And as well, I'm working on a 6-part horror project which I'm doing with an actor friend who I met through networking, and that's looking good now. So going back to your original question, I mean, again, I've seen so much great stuff. I mean, on the website, if you go onto the Film and TV Now website and go to the reviews, there's umpteen reviews. There's about 5 years worth of review stuff. I saw a film yesterday called Parallax, which is a kind of a science fiction drama about reality. So if you're into films like Brainstorm and Inception, or even Tenet, which is the film, you know, and you want a brain workout, then check that one out as well. I've seen I'm trying to think what else I've seen recently, which was Andrew Gower did a film 2 years ago called Baby Frankenstein, which is about this prototype, which is like a baby, which is it's sort of activated. It's a bit like E.T. You know, this teenager discovers this prototype in a attic, and it actually activates and starts going around the neighborhood. It's sort of reminiscent of films like Short Circuit and E.T. Andrew Gower plays a government agent, and it's kind of a crossover film. It's interesting to see how people react to it, because it's a bit like, it's neither a family film, but it's more in the cult arena. So I think when you watch a lot of movies, you know, I see different ones, and then you have to look at them individually. You know, I mean, I'm looking forward to A Quiet Place Part 2 when that comes out, because that was one of my favorite horrors of the last few years. There's a wonderful, actually, there is a recommendation that there's a film coming out soon called The Curse of Audrey Earnshaw. And it's and if you're into your classic 70s horror like The Exorcist and The Omen, this one's quite spooky. It's basically about a communal thing, a bit like the same kind of thing in M. Night Shyamalan's The Village, where there's this daughter who's hidden from view, and she actually has a curse on this community, which is this farming community. And it's quite spooky and striking. It's set in 1973, around the time of the original release of The Exorcist, and that's the great thing about it. So that's a movie that I think everybody needs to watch out for. So that's the recommendation. I know I did it for the work, but it's a great film, and there are others. I mean, if you look on the website, you'll see I've written 5 years worth, and if you go right to the back, you'll see my review for Friday the 13th. And there's a lot of interviews on there of new filmmakers and updates that you can catch.
Now, which Friday the 13th? The very first one?
The very first original 1980 version, which I was about 14 when I first saw it here. I was a very shy person, and my parents went out with my brother to a party and left me in the house with VHS copies of Friday the 13th and Zombies Dawn of the Dead. It was actually... The George A. Romero Dawn of the Dead was actually known in the UK when it was first released as Zombies Dawn of the Dead.
Uh-huh.
And it was only the 117, 19-minute cuts. I mean, we got, there's about 3 versions of the film. There's an Argento cut, the European cut, and there's the 2.5-hour director's cut, which is good. But I was happy. I had my big bottle of soda and my pizza, and I was left in the house. I mean, it was like, around the same time I was watching things like Poltergeist as well, and stuff like that. So
another Tobe Hooper classic. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it's they at the Screenwriters Festival, Michael Grace was one of the co-screenwriters on that film. If you go into the Screenwriters Festival online, there's a real-time interview they did. They did a special script to screen of Poltergeist, where you can learn a lot about the making of the film. They did one for Face Off as well, from one of the 2 writers, which is amazing. And they had like questions fed in from people. So it's just, that I think, going back to what we're talking about with access to information and people and chatting and stuff, I think this is another good reason why people should reach out in the internet and the online stuff and look for their passion. I often talk about a point of passion. If you start off with your point of passion and go back to that every time you're unsure, then that's the great thing. And also having a leap of faith, taking a leap of faith. I think people now, with what's going on, need to take a leap of faith in their lives, and in a positive way. I mean, of course, it's not easy because, we are, with this uncertain times, but, it's having that confidence. And I think that things will improve, people's lives will benefit and be informed by that. And that's 2 things that have really helped me overcome challenges in the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, it's just stepping outside your comfort zone, like we talked about with some directors. And for me, working from home and doing the live streaming virtual stuff, I had to kind of sacrifice some things, and then and now I have to make some stipulations on myself that I'm not going back on set until there's a vaccine. I'm a COVID compliance officer now. I completed that certificate for here in the States. Most if not all productions, if they fall under a certain level, these productions, they're required to have a COVID compliance officer. So with that, I'm willing to go back on set for, but I kind of had to like put stipulations, and that was kind of the discipline. That's kind of the leap of faith, is that with these stipulations, I have to make the things that are virtual and live streaming and the remote telework, I have to make that work, and I have to focus on that. Because I for years I was, always kind of setting up and prepping to, like, do voiceovers and do live streaming and work from home and remote edit and, write from home. And then when this quarantine happened, it was like, okay, it's time to turn that stuff on, because before I never really had a chance to take the opportunity to revamp the podcast, or to, revamp some of the passion projects that I could do on a super low budget. And, half of it's remote with other actors doing voiceovers, other actors, maybe shooting at their own home with a simple camera setup and a green screen. And now, having had all that time to set up, and not being preoccupied with going on set and going on someone else's set and going to this event or that gig or this shoot or that shoot. Now it's like I can really focus on this and work from home and still do corporate and industrial stuff virtually. Mm-hmm. But like you said, leaps of faith, they come in all shapes and sizes. And, also with a wife and kid, I have to make sure that they're healthy, and I don't get them sick. I got to make sure I don't get sick so that I don't get them sick. And obviously I got to take care of myself so I could be there for my kid and for my wife. And so you got to make that, you kind of have to set those stipulations for yourself. I can't go back on set until there's a vaccine. And So now I'm going to take other leaps of faith into my own productions, my own scripts, you know, dabbling in, you know, maybe some CGI, some animation, what have you, and just keep, and you know, finding something new that could be done, you know, that I never thought to look into before. But
yeah, it's great that, you know, I admire people like yourself who are, you know, they're rethinking their whole approach, because again, you know, the wonderful thing is I think the other thing that's happened with COVID is that I don't understand sometimes that when things hit the way they did in March, all of a sudden I think there was a sense people forgot about what they experienced, who they met, or the people that are there. So I'm very blessed that I have people who I've known for years now who are now coming back into my life in a big way.
yeah.
And you're actually meeting. I mean, for example, I'll give you an idea. I was at a barbecue, going back to this film part that I did. I was actually at a barbecue with a friend when I had the phone call about it, and it came out of the blue. And then secondly, I had another guy, a filmmaker, a guy called James Abadi, and he had this film for like 10 years, which is called The Story of Expletive. You fill in the blanks. And it's a music satire. And he sent me a link, and again, this week I connected him with Jenna Sura at the London Independent Film Festival. It's interesting how there's this synchronicity and serendipity. People suddenly things happen that come into your life when you need it. And, you know, I think that's what I found. I think the positive results of something like what's happening is that, like, I think nature has to fill a void, you know, as in the same way that nature abhors a vacuum, nature fills a void. And we all look for ways to compensate for what's missing or what's lost. And, you know, I think this is what COVID's doing. People are having to reassess, you know, if they're not getting what they have, you know, in their lives, if they haven't got the consistency of what's making their lives work at the moment, then they've got to rethink it. And, you know, it's not just down to governments or organizations to do that. I think it is partly down to the responsibility of us as individuals to take responsibility for our actions and capitalize on them. You know, nobody's going to, you know, we see it a lot in movies. You know, we see it in, you know, when Stallone does a speech in Rocky Balboa, you know, it's about how hard you can get it and keep moving forward. I mean, it's you know, people criticize Stallone a lot for what he does sometimes in his movies, but sometimes he creates a moment like that, and he creates you know, because he creates very strong messages. You know, he creates sources of information. You know, it's like, you know, it's weird, you know, when Apollo Creed says to Stallone in Rocky 3, you know, make it right for yourself, you know, because you'll be sorry you didn't. We sometimes dismiss these messages in movies, but the funny thing is we might be, I'm happy to accept those simple messages. They're just so inspiring, they're so invigorating, and they should give you a stimulus.
Yeah.
For your body, you know, the little voice in your head, you know, sometimes we talk about the negative little voice, sometimes you have the other voice that says, yeah, you know,
get up. Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
go, you know, and you have to pick yourself up. It's so I'm going to be interested to see. The big thing I want to know is I want to be interested to see what happens, you know, how people will react and how they will take action over the next 6 months. I'm not talking about myself personally. I think I've kind of got that in hand, and yourself as well. But it'll be interesting to see what does pan out, because it's like, this is the interesting thing about that anti-lockdown protest in London we had over the weekend. You know, we had people are crowd gathering. You know, we've got the ongoing things about Black Lives Matter and those kind of protests, and, you know, what's happening with that. And people are looking to other stuff that's as equally important. But what's been noticing is that people are observing the requirements of the lockdown. and they're taking responsibility. And so I hope, I hope people will be will be able to sort of be more positive in their actions. I mean, people are positive enough anyway. They have to be, because you cannot be anything but optimistic or positive to get through something like a lockdown, which is what we're going for at the moment.
Yeah.
And I hope that what I'm saying is stimulating in some way. I think, but I'm saying this from experience. The last 2 or 3 years has been, the triumph is actually being able to sit here and be more positive about what I'm talking about. But the upside of it is it's having the confidence to share your experience. And yeah.
So, going back to Rocky 3, I mean, one of the lines in Rocky 3 that stood out for me was, Apollo's trying to train Rocky. Rocky says, we'll just do it tomorrow. And Apollo just screams at him, there is no tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was, see, that kind of mentality, and even more so, we were talking about, documentaries about filmmakers. There's a documentary called, I believe the documentary is called Electric Boogaloo, the wild, untold story of canon.
It's brilliant. I watched that. I actually watched that recently. What I love about that is, if you're talking about misconceptions, there's some footage on there, like Bo Derek, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Now she's on there, and I think she really got. I mean, Joan Rivers, when she was alive, actually really ripped into her for one point. But when you watch Bo Derek on that documentary, she comes across as incredibly intelligent. My favorite bit in that is actually the bit where one of the people's reflecting on the fact that they said to me, do you want to eat here? And then he went down the corridor and picked up the assistant's Chinese food and then brought it back. But I love the energy of that film. And but Canon have been.
Well, the thing that stuck out to me was, they said, like, we got to make the movie.
Yeah.
We're just going to make the movie, and it's not going to be. It's probably not going to win any Oscars, but they stuck to their guns. Listen, we got the money, we got the budget, we got the script, we got the actors, we're going to make the movie. But guess what? They won an Oscar for Runaway Train.
They were nominated. John Voight was nominated.
I think Eric Roberts won.
No, Eric Roberts was nominated. That was 1986. And I think William Hurt won for Kiss of the Spider Woman.
Oh. Okay.
But that said, you are right. I mean, Runaway Train is probably the best Cannon film they ever did.
Yeah.
But also, there are honorable mentions in there. I mean, Street Smart's pretty good. The Christopher Reeve film. Morgan Freeman was.
Oh, nominated. That's right. Yeah.
Morgan Freeman was nominated for Best Supporting. I mean, that was the first time I saw Morgan Freeman. What happened with that was I actually saw it at a local cinema in my hometown of Birmingham. That they did it was in a cinema in a local, like the Cannon group actually owns cinemas in the UK. So if you were lucky, they'd actually show them in Cannon cinemas. And I actually went to watch it in one of the small screens. And I purely saw it because I wanted to see it for Christopher Reeve, even though he's playing another reporter and stuff. But I just remember the scene where, like, he was in the car with Christopher Reeve, and Morgan Freeman literally broke this glass and held it to Christopher Reeve's head, and it was the most terrifying moment in the film. And I thought, wow, it just that performance just blew me away. But the Cannon stuff has actually improved. I mean, things like Life Force and Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 have garnered a really interesting thing. I mean, some of the Chuck Norris stuff is fun.
Yeah, the Van Damme stuff, the Chuck Norris stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, they even did what was it, Cobra and
Cobra, Over the Top.
Over the Top is Stallone, yeah.
Yeah. I actually quite liked Over the Top. I mean, it was it's typical thing. I mean, it was fun. I mean, I remember watching its opening weekend, and I mean, whether or not arm wrestling is the big thing, but it was an attractive movie. I mean, it had a great cast, and I loved and I was into Stallone back then. I mean, with things like Rocky IV, and I saw Cobra. It was actually shown in the UK in Ultra Stereo, which was this short-lived sound system, which You know, it was probably really good. I mean, certain films in 1986 were screened in ultra stereo. I mean, Chainsaw 2, and also I think Friday the 13th, the Part 6 Jason Lives was one of the others. But I think they discontinued it because I think there was objections from like Dolby or one of the other companies, so it was short-lived and stuff.
Yeah, well, you kind of touched upon it, but you've got some festivals coming up, but so you know we can delve more into that. What's next on the agenda for say the next 6 months to a year? What's the next set of goals?
Well, my priority is, okay, so for the next 6 months, let me just get my stuff up, because I mean, I suppose my goal is to just keep building on what it is. So you know, I'm looking to build the brand for the production and film companies. I'm working on a lot of different screenplays as well, which is what I've mentioned already. I think for the next 6 months, I think one of the priorities is the Paris International Film Festival. The website is it's ParisIntlFest.com. And at the moment, they're taking submissions. We're in the process of doing a lot of publicity for that festival. I'm working with Jenna Suru, so we're sort of, I think Jenna's in the process of finalizing the jury and everything else, and that we're doing some staggered coverage on Film and TV Now. The film that I did, Frostbite's going to be showing next summer. I think it's due for a screening next summer. I think release is next year sometime. I mean, my goal is really to, you know, sort of give my acting ambitions and filmmaking ambitions a positive shot. You know, that's my goal. I want to, because I feel like it's unfinished business. You know, I want to, you know, I figured, you know, I've shown films and I've written about them. I think why not start making them and getting out there? I think it's, and the thing is with the people I'm meeting in the industry, it's great that I'm very lucky now to have, you know, I've got a lot of personal responses from filmmakers. There's a guy called Rel Dowdle who did a movie back in 1999 called Train Ride, which is an interesting, in the context of Me Too, it's a really interesting movie about 3 college students in an all-black college who take advantage of a female black student. He's also done a great documentary about child support on fathers called Where's Daddy, which is now making waves in a lot of the universities in America. So I think it's just been added to the Harvard Library, and that's online. It's available on multi-platforms. Dave McClane has just done a great new music biopic called Schemers, which is about Dundee's thriving music scene. And he sort of promoted a lot of bands like Simple Minds and Ultravox back in the 80s, which has just won like a special award at the Sunscreen Film Festival. So I think my goal for the next 6 months is primarily going to be a mix of promotion and reviewing and writing. You know, screenwriting is very important to me. I mean, there's one other project I've been working on, which is sort of in a bit of a legal thing at the moment, which I'm doing with a French writer. We kind of abandoned it, but she's come back to me, and they actually want to buy the copyright, which on the idea, but they haven't said anything on it. It's sort of a mixture of ideas. So for me, for the next 6 months, that's my goal, to be productive in a creative way. And because I've sensed that having this time to sort of yourself and have time to do stuff, there's never been a better time to do it. You know, that's the thing. I mean, I'm not somebody who can sit on my laurels. I've always felt that, you know, I've always believed in creating something out of nothing. And I think other people can, you know, whatever's per people's individual dreams are out there. You know, I mean, I'm sure there's people listening to your podcast tonight who are probably wondering what the next phase is going to be for their lives. And, you know, you've got 2 choices. You can say, well, okay, I'm going to let this pandemic sort of defeat me, or I'm going to say, right, I'm breathing, I'm living, I'm healthy, with respect to the people, to those people who've maybe been affected by it in a direct or indirect way. It's, I have every sympathy, and I root for everybody who has been affected by it in a big way. I mean, people, seriously, people have lost lives because of it. It's not over by a long shot, but you can't, it would be wrong to kind of just dismiss what you're doing. You have to go out there and you have to, make something happen, because be proactive and be productive, and, make your dreams happen. That's what people should be aiming for. And there is so much more stuff out there. I think there's more to come. I think, the world is going to change again in November, because, the American presidencies, that's happening again, and that's going to happen regardless of what's happening with the pandemic. We've got things going on in the UK. We've got, the political arena is still out there. The world arena's out there. There's all kinds of conspiracies at the moment about what's happening, but the important thing is to communicate and be positive and spread the word. Let people know that you're out there. Network, do it virtually. There are a lot of free events. I mean, if you can get to free networking events online and let people know you're out there, if you have a specific passion that you have, on a subject, if you're passionate about languages and art and sports, and, one of the other things I do in my spare time is kickboxing, and they've been doing kickboxing lessons with Zoom. I train with a school in London called KB Fitness, which is kbfitness.co.uk, and they're gradually getting back to doing a live dojo and stuff. So, and it's great. That's the benefits of technology. There's so much stuff people can do. There's so much stuff we can do. And, have a bit of faith in yourself, have a bit of faith in what you do. Take care of your family, take care of your friends, see your friends when you can, let them know you're out there, support your friends, support people who need it. Mental health is a very big situation at the moment. I mean, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge are highlighting it in their work for the Heads Together charity. And, they're being very active. And I mean, there's I'm on LinkedIn anyway. If anybody wants to get in touch with me, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter. I'm on Twitter as Higgins99John. I'm on LinkedIn as the press coordinator for the Paris International Film Festival, although also CEO Nightway Films and stuff like that. I'm on Instagram as Templar Doom, and on Facebook you can find me, and you can see me. There's lots of John Higginses, but you'll find me up there as well. There's a picture of me in front of, let me just check my Facebook page. I'll be able to tell you which it is. I'm, if you want to find me on Facebook, you can find me in front of the Batmobile at the Warner Studios in the US.
Awesome. Well, John, I can't thank you enough for coming on here. And like you said, I mean, now's the time to study, to cram, to start knocking out those passion projects, knocking out those honey-do lists, And
there's one last thing I just want to say is that sometimes I have this dream that I'm going to be on stage at the Oscars. And I had this speech. I thought, well, let's not wait for the Oscars. Let's say now. But part of my thing would say, dreams matter. Dreams are important. Whatever your dream is, embrace it and appreciate it. It's, you're in a room, when you go out, or in this world, we've got billions of dreams. That's amazing. Regardless of your state of mind, whether you're a politician, yourself from Cleveland, or if you're in one of the 50 states, or you're in Alaska, or you're in Hawaii, or you're in you know, everything begins with a first step. I mean, that's, you know, a cliche, but I think what I want to do today, if there's anything I want people to take away from our time today, I want people to celebrate the power of dreams. They're wonderful. They're not, and they're individual. They're not something that people, they're exclusive to you. You know, going back to what we were saying is that when I was 18, I dropped out of school and I was living at home with my parents in Birmingham, and I was wandering around most days, and all I was doing was going home and I was listening to the radio and listening to a lot of music. And I'm sort of looking to the horizon and I'm thinking, am I ever going to get a job? And am I ever going to get out of there? And 32 years later, you know, some people didn't think I could live and work in London. I did it, and I'm still here now. And so it's about the realm of possibility. And for me, America, for example, which is a place I've been to several times. I mean, I've been to San Diego, San Francisco. You know, another passion of mine is dancing. When I was 27, I could not dance, but I learned West Coast swing. I learned modern jive, which is a bit like East Coast swing. And some of my best friends are now, because I decided I wanted to learn. One other thing I want to say is there's a guy called Kevin Brereton, and he's a top martial artist. And he came over, he was at KB, and he came over and I asked him this question. I said to him, who would you have in your ultimate dojo? So I was thinking, my mindset was thinking, okay, so he's going to say Chuck Norris, Bruce Lee, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Gina Carano. His response was this: anybody who wants to learn. Anybody who wants to learn. That to me that's the most important thing. Anybody who wants to learn can achieve what they want. You know, that's what I believe. And that's what I think is my last point. I think I'll say that.
Yeah, and absolutely. I'll touch upon that because I think people confuse the words possible and probable.
Yeah.
You know, if one person did something and you say, could I do that? Yes, you could. If one person did it or two people did it, anybody can, but they have to, you know, they have to take the steps to do it.
Yeah.
That's the difference between possible and probable. You know, winning an Oscar or, you know, landing on the moon or landing on Mars. Well, not Mars. Let's scratch Mars, but landing on the moon, winning an Oscar, becoming president of the United States, becoming prime minister. These are all possible things. Only few people do it. So, you know, it's hard work, it's determination, it's studying, it's embracing the craft. It's, you know, doing, and another ingredient, me personally, is doing what you love to do. If you really want to do it, you'll do it if you really want to. And there's been a lot of people I've seen that were like, you know, hey, you know, I'm gonna be a filmmaker, I'm gonna be an actor, I'm gonna be a musician, I'm gonna be a writer. And they never did, because they probably really didn't want to. They were just, you know, talking trash, or they, you know, maybe for a second they thought, yeah, that'd be cool. That's something I can do, but I gotta sneeze, but
well,
excuse me.
If you want an example of somebody who has inspired the world, are you aware of Captain Tom Moore?
It sounds familiar, yeah.
Okay, so Captain Tom Moore
well, let me interject. Is he the Captain Tom that David Bowie sings about?
No, that's Major Tom.
Major Tom, okay.
Okay, so Captain Tom Moore, okay, now he's 100 years old and he's got a Zimmer frame. And a few months ago, when the lockdown happened, he decided he was going to use his Zimmer frame and do 100 laps around his garden. And this guy, he did 100 laps, and basically he got on television and stuff like that. The guy has now raised over £100 million in charity, and he's become a local hero. This guy has trained on, you know, he's done incredible. I mean, he's been on TV. He's now got a biography. Apparently the Hollywood studios are interested in doing this. If you look up Captain Tom Moore and look up all the things, you'll see this. It's an extraordinary story. But what I'm saying is, this guy is, if a guy who's 100 years old can actually do something like that, there is hope for us all.
Yeah.
You know, going back to David Fussell, this is guy's a homeless filmmaker. If he can make a movie and sort of get out there, there's hope for everybody, you know. So it doesn't matter what your background is, there's stuff there, and people will make things happen. So yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, John Higgins, I can't thank you enough for coming on. It was a lot, you know, a lot of great insight, a lot of great stories.
It's my pleasure, Glenn. I mean, I'm honored that you've invited me on here. I mean, it's great. I mean, I think it's great to chat, and it's great to share stories. And I think for me, what I love is the fact that you know, I'm reaching out to people stateside. I mean, I hope to be back in the US at some point. You know, you know, I was in there, last time I was there was like in December 2013. I was over for the US Open Swing Dance Championship. So I was actually in America twice that year. It was just after I was made redundant. So I went to San Francisco and Chicago in October, did an event called Boogie by the Bay. And then in December, I did the US Open and stayed in Los Angeles. I stayed at the hotel called the Garland, which is near Universal City. And I misjudged the weather because it was like, I went to Santa Monica and Venice in the afternoon, then came back, and my fans were like icicles. So, but no, I hope to, you know, there are other places in the States that I'd love to visit. There's plenty of them. I mean, I love the hospitality. I love America. It's a brilliant place, and I hope to return sometime.
Awesome. Awesome, John. Well, again, thanks. I'm glad someone wants to come over here, because not a lot of people do these days, but
it's fantastic. It's a fantastic country. I mean, I came to New York nearly 30 years ago and you know, I can even remember today when I got off the bus at Grand Central Station in New York. I remember looking up at the skyscrapers. The most beautiful thing was the rain came down in beads. Mm-hmm. And when you see your first cab, you see your first yellow cab and you're driving in. And, you know, like on Thursday nights when I was about 10 or 11, like Taxi was one of the big shows in the UK. So I used to love to be able to see a New York cab. And I love, you know, I stayed in Greenwich Village and you know, I mean, I must have covered all the first sites on my first day, walked down Broadway to Battery Park, and then went to Ellis Island. It was like, no, I was like, blimey, I better slow down. But no, America is, you know, I think like everywhere else, it's going through its own challenges at the moment. I think it's just a shame, you know, they're talking about these air bridges in the UK. I mean, I do think, I hope that those channels will be open soon and we'll all be able to travel, because I have a lot of good friends in the United States, and it's just not the same, you know, talking on Zoom. I mean, I'd rather have the one-to-one and, you know, give my friends in America a hug and embrace it. And that's what's important to me. And maybe one day I'll be in Cleveland, maybe say hello. And as Huey Lewis said, the heart of rock and roll.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, again, John, it was a pleasure. And, you know, I learned a lot, and I hope my viewers did. To my viewers, I hope I've earned the privilege of your time and viewership. I know my guest has. And until next time, you know what to do.
Right. Thank you very much, Glenn.